It worked. We're here. How about
I
that?
have to know if Jake's commentary was going through because that was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was not.
That's a shame.
You're on.
That's a
It's
shame.
too bad.
You have to unmute your mic.
No, that's true. It automatically mutes, I guess. But Craig, I agree. That 30 seconds seemed really long.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe we won't do that. But welcome to the webcast today. It is a topic that I tell you, it's one of those things that people fear, and rightfully so. Ransomware can just take a company down. And at this point, it's kind of a situation that, it's not if it's going to happen to you, it is when. At some point, you will either get hit or there will be an attempt to hit you and your company. And we've got some folks that I hate to trigger your PTSD, Tara, because you have been through this with a previous company. And so she's got some firsthand experience that we kind of wanted to share and just create a discussion about ransomware, things you could do to maybe prevent it. You can prepare for it and talk maybe a little remediation as well. So to jump in, maybe you can give us a little bit of a background, Tara. Change the names to protect the guilty and or innocent.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Okay. Am I sweating? I feel like I'm sweating already. It's stressing me out. Yeah. So it was a few years ago, and it was pretty much the classic ransomware attack, the profile that I read about. It was a staged attack. It didn't happen all at once. It was the first attack started in June, and it started with Mimi cats. We didn't know what was happening, which I don't think you normally do. And they came in and got credentials. They got admin credentials, but didn't do anything with it that we knew about until later. They sold those credentials. And again, we didn't know this until December. They sold those credentials to North Korean hackers.
So how long did they have those credentials?
6 months.
Okay.
If I was just throwing this out there, what if you had changed your admin password, within a year?
Well,
would that have helped you?
It would have. I mean, we had it set up to change every 6 months.
Oh,
that was the policy. So it would have been, within 6 months. So December is when we got the ransom note, and it was CryptoLocker.
How did that come? Did that just come via email? How did they contact you?
Did you show up in person?
Yeah, they knocked on the door.
They were like, "Hi, here's your note." No, it was awful. I mean, let me just say it was absolutely awful. It shows up on the computers.
Yeah.
Everything's locked. You try to log in, and it says, it's everywhere. It's absolutely everywhere. So the first part of the attack is they hide it. They don't want you to see it. You could not see it. This was a fairly big company. You're talking terabytes of data. I don't know how you would see it. Actually, I want to know. How can you see it? I'd love to know to this day. But the second part is they make it blatantly obvious. Hi, you've been hacked. And at that point, when it was painfully obvious that we had been hacked, and it's very creepy because the hackers have lawyers. So
that's so weird.
It's very weird. So then you'll be contacted by the hackers' lawyers, and they'll say, "Hey, here's your ransom," which was millions of dollars.
Better pay Saul.
Yeah, I was about to say better call Saul.
Yeah.
Saul Goodman-esque lawyers.
Yeah. And so then you're faced with, are we going to pay this? Or are we going to try to fight it? And so we fought it. So it was absolutely horrible. It happened on the weekend, which is typical from what I did a lot of research the last couple of days and a lot of crying at my desk as I kind of revisited it. But
it makes sense it'd be weekend, because if it happens during the week and the sysadmin sees it starting, they might be able to head it off at the pass before it spreads too far. On the weekend, most likely you're gonna get more damage before anyone sees it's happening.
Yeah, and I think that's the case for most attacks, but still to this day, and I've asked Austin like 40 times this week, like, how do you know? Do you know? Because we had this was a multi-city attack. One of the sysadmins noticed in the middle of the night that his firewall was getting hit over and over again, and turned it off. line back to Salt Lake and didn't tell any of us. So kind of wanted to kill him.
It's always network guys.
Yeah, always those network guys. So that was one mistake that was made. But yeah, how do you know, Austin? Do you know?
How do I know?
How would you know as a network guy?
I feel it in the air.
Yeah.
I come to work today and I'm like, whoa, something doesn't feel right. So there's like two stances you can have with a network, right? You can either have it be a network where it just forwards packets and you segment your firewall and that's about it. Or you can have devices in the middle, like a firewall, like a next generation firewall that does TLS inspection, but with Quick being standardized about a month ago, look it up. It's going to be a little harder to inspect TLS. And you've got things like Cisco Umbrella, which they identify malicious URLs or A records or quad A records, and they stop them from actually transiting your firewall, right? But really, as I've been researching, there's two teams on the network side, right? There's the team that's like, oh, the firewall and the network devices should be playing an active role in security and forwarding packets. So we're going to pay a lot of money to do that, right? And the other team's like, okay, firewall, yeah, but your routers, your switches, just let them route and switch, pay a little less, and take that money that you would have spent if you have it and put it into a good antivirus. Because at the end of the day, it's not your network. It's not the network devices that are necessarily the targets of these attacks, right?
Where do you fall on that?
Can I? So here, or what I like to normally do is I'm more on the team of just letting the network forward packets. Because as you start introducing features into a firewall or into your routers and switches, if they have them, you start throttling your capabilities in terms of bandwidth. And that's big for us, right? We're huge on bandwidth. That's why we have so much here. But we have a really good antivirus. You know what I mean? I'm content with it. Others may say otherwise. I don't know. But I feel like if you pay for an antivirus and it's not what we would call, I don't want to say consumer grade, but I want to say it's well known. It has a good reputation. That's a huge step. But yeah, it's like the question here, how would you stop an internal attack from the network side? You'd almost have to do what like Cisco Umbrella does. You'd have to almost know what the malicious IPs, ASN, URL, A record, quad A record is. But it's an after the fact. It's not like when you get attacked, it kind of happens slowly, right? It starts to spread kind of like fungus. And you can prevent it, but you would almost hope that you have monitoring tools in the way that would tell you what that traffic or where that traffic is going, right?
So real quick from the chat, sorry, Ryan said he thought that maybe you knew your password was taken and didn't do anything about it.
Oh no, we didn't know. No. So this all came out after the fact. This was in the remediation stage. No. We didn't know the credentials had been taken. That was the Mimicat that came out later.
That's because if he was right and you knew your password had been compromised, you didn't change it.
Oh yeah, we're like, no, we're cool with that. Go ahead.
That's a you issue.
No. Yeah, no. We didn't know that until later. So no. So Austin, just to give you the full clarity, every market had a firewall. Every market had a VPN back to the main corporate headquarters, but not to each other. Right. So when we knew we were getting attacked, that was all shut down, right? Mm-hmm. But the damage was done.
Basically, yeah, you have to, when you're being attacked, start turning network connections off. It can't spread if the roads don't exist, right?
Yeah, so we turned them all off, of course, when we knew that had happened. But and this was the case that we were a big company. We did have antivirus, we did have firewalls, we did have all those security things in place, and it still happened. So
see, there's a caveat there, right? Because I thought there was an addendum to this story where somebody forgot something.
Well, there were mistakes. It wasn't perfect. I'm not going to say the story. We did everything absolutely perfect.
Right,
But a user clicked on an email. That was where it started, of course.
Yeah.
And we were transitioning our antivirus from on-prem to in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the sys administrators made a mistake in thinking that when we transitioned from on-prem to the cloud, the on-prem would still be active and receiving the antivirus definitions, and that wasn't the case. When we moved to the cloud, on-prem stopped getting those definitions, and so that was a mistake.
Yeah.
And so that left us more vulnerable. But I'm a believer you can do everything perfectly, and it's still going to happen.
Yeah, probably still will.
Yeah.
That's why you just don't use computers ever.
Ever. Yeah, just ever.
Just unplug them all.
Yeah. But anyway, so it happened middle of the night. Scramble, freaking out, as you can imagine. It had spread to everywhere. On-prem backups gone, the whole vCenter gone.
Yeah.
Every domain controller except for one gone. So pretty much your nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
Just horrible.
Just casual.
Casual. No, I mean, it was absolutely terrible. What saved us was we had an off-prem backup.
Yeah.
In a completely separate building, and we were able to save one domain controller so we could remake all of them. That was what saved us. Those two things, I think, are absolutely key.
I think it's important on almost any breach or hack. It's going to be user based.
Yes.
You can have all the security you want. We were talking about this today. We sent a test phishing email a couple months ago, and I got it. I clicked on it. Kelly clicked on it.
Yep.
I think you said something like 80%. It was such a good one.
It was big, but that's because it was super relevant, right? I think
it was relevant, and it was timed so when people woke up, if they had email on their phones, they would be clicking on that. It was a brilliant one, and you got almost all of us.
It almost got me, and I'm on the IT team, and that's just because it was talking about COVID, right? It was like, hey, we at HR are redoing our COVID policies, and I was like, whoa.
So it's you immediately feel like I gotta click on this.
Right, a super relevant topic, and I believe the week prior, it was the weekend. I think
they actually
had HR team was actually talking about COVID.
Yeah,
so
your timing was impeccable. And then didn't you send this one out late at night?
Yes.
So because it hit Jordan and I the same way. We I woke up. Jordan says he woke up. You look at your phone, you're groggy, and you see this one that looks like COVID policy from HR. I'm like, okay, I'm just laying in bed. I'll go ahead and read this one.
Yeah.
Boom.
I was in a Tex-Mex drive-through when I saw it, and I was like, what? And then I was like, I'll just look at this when I get home. And then I get home, and I'm like, oh.
If I come in at noon, I don't think I would have clicked on it. A big part because it was relevant, it was timed well, and I actually don't even have email on my phone anymore. Because I can't be trusted.
Yeah, we can't.
The ransomware was always coming from the inside.
So what are the steps for prevention? I mean, we've had a few people, offer up some suggestions in the chat, but for you guys here, what are those prevention steps?
I mean,
for me, it was a huge lesson, of course, huge lesson. And let me just say, I don't think I'm an expert in any of these things, but it was a fantastic lesson that scarred me for life. And it was 2 weeks of 20-hour days. I think my boss slept over literally for 2 weeks. And he's a super genius, by the way. So this was all due to him being a genius, not me at all, really. I just did what he told me to do. But I think backups was absolutely key. So on-prem, immutable backup, cloud backup, and off-prem, completely separate building. And Jordan, didn't you say your brother believed in the separate power source and an off-site location?
He has a separate backup on a completely different power grid. So if it's an event where the power's going down your area, you're not going down as a company.
Yeah.
But the big thing, because we just said, no matter what you have, users are the biggest weak link.
Yes.
That's where you want to have like multi-factor.
Seriously,
MFA is going to protect your users from themselves in most cases. So
Yes.
I think multi-factor at this point is, if you don't have it, you're begging.
And I'm not like, I'm a network guy. I know it seems like I love Cisco, and don't tell them, but they have this product called Duo. It's free for up to 10 users. So it's great for trying it out, and it integrates with almost anything. It integrates with my house key. It integrates with my eyeball. Like it's pretty great. So Cisco Duo, fantastic multi-factor tool. Great for Azure, great for Active Directory. When somebody logs into a computer, you can set it so that they get a multi-factor prompt, or if they authenticate with, or they're trying to log into a computer via RDP, they get the multi-factor prompt. It's huge. It's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we had someone in the chat mention a cybersecurity team. I don't know if we can put up the graph we had of what size of company is likely to get hit.
Yeah, 1 second.
But
Taser mouse for end user.
so the most frequently hit team is like mid-sized companies, because large companies are likely to have the funding for a cybersecurity team that focuses just on that.
Yeah.
Small companies usually are lower priority target just because there's not generally going to get as much. Mid-size, where they probably aren't quite big enough for cybersecurity, that's where the most of them seem to get hit. So I agree cybersecurity is important, but it's also expensive, and not like a team dedicated to that is not reasonable for every company size.
You have to pay big for these security engineers. Like you can't, unless you want to pay a big ransom, you can either pay employees big or ransoms big, and that's like your choice. And most people probably just,
choose employees.
Right.
Yeah, but what if you don't have that? So what if your company is like, nah, we don't care. It's not important. What do you do?
Then they don't care about making money. So,
Then they
or
get hit.
keeping their money.
No, but I think this is the point to make what Jordan said. These are the smaller companies where maybe you have a 4-person team, a 5-person team. So my advice there is, and this is what we did, is you find your craziest person on your team and you put that person over your security.
There is no shame in hiring an MSSP too. Like,
oh yeah, no,
there's no shame in offloading security to another company, because it's cheaper than an employee for sure.
It is.
Well, and then you get, in many cases, a higher level of expertise, because this is what this company focuses on. Where, I don't know, it's you got to weigh, okay, how much am I going to pay an employee, or versus how much am I going to pay an outside company to help me with my security, and pay their team and their years of expertise and all that. So you just kind of have to weigh those options. We've got a couple questions. You guys up for taking some?
Let's do it.
Okay. So what particular early warning signs do you guys look out for that may indicate an incoming attack?
Unusual network traffic. If you're monitoring it, you're seeing unusual destinations in large quantities. Because a lot of these attacks are not, the payload is provided by a server, and a lot of the newest attacks that I've seen, a lot of times it's the payload that is actually installed on a computer is very small, and then it pulls data from a server, right? So if you're seeing weird traffic to IPs or certain ASNs, that's a huge sign. That's where these like DNS prevention methods like Umbrella, I think Palo Alto calls it Wildfire, but like identifying malicious URLs or suspicious URLs is a big deal too.
So just real quick, in the chat, there's a couple people said, even with MSSP, you still need someone security focused to monitor things on your side, just because they're going to have so many different clients. So having an MSSP doesn't mean you're free and clear. You still need someone that can at least speak to security to follow along. And
so it's about quality for MSSP too, right? Like they've got, let's say, 50 other businesses they work with. So they're not going to be able to sit down with you every day and figure it out. You do need somebody, if you want that detailed security mindset, you need to get that. You still have to make decisions on your antivirus. It's not like the MSSP is just going to come in and well, maybe they do, but in my experience, you still have your own stuff you're running, right?
Yeah.
But it's a good, like, I wouldn't call it an insurance policy, but I'd be like somebody you can point to when things go wrong. Like, hey, we're noticing weird stuff. What do you see? And then they're like, we're on it, chief. And they can do the investigating while you're able to continue, hopefully, doing your job if you're not being compromised.
So it seems that the major thing for tracking, though, is network traffic. And I don't know how you track for logging, just because logging is going to be all over the board. It's going to go into different locations.
Well, that's where, like, hopefully your antivirus has a central console that will start spitting out
Yeah, but so I was going to say this though, but I want to ask you again about the logs in the night. So there was probably a good year after the attack where I was put in charge. We use Sophos, and this was what I was saying earlier because I'm pretty crazy. I'm pretty like stay up at night and go, what was that? What was that attack? I made myself crazy looking at the threat analysis center every day. I'd open it up and go, what does that mean? Is that a problem? And I would just research everything. You may have noticed with the outline for this podcast, I was problematic, right? Like
Shade over 10 pages.
I go into
10
weeds.
pages. Yeah, it was amazing.
I like to research stuff, but I mean, it got to the point where it was not really healthy because I was so paranoid. I made my boss crazy.
I was thinking with that or with logs, anything, you want to have some sort of filtering where only things that could be relevant pop up. Otherwise, it's going to become white noise and you ignore it, or it's going to take all your focus and you're not going to be doing your regular day-to-day job.
Yeah, but it took me a while to really trust. So Sophos has a thing called MTR where you pay them to call you if it's a real problem, which is what you're just saying. But it really took me a while before I really trusted. So I was like, well, really? Do I trust them? Because I was like jaded. I was scarred from the whole experience. But I think you're right. And after a few years, I was like, I'll just wait for them to call me. But it's hard to ignore all this data coming in because it looks like an issue.
Right.
Because it'll say Trojan, and you're like, nah. After a while, you ignore it. But
I think especially in small to mid, you don't have time to investigate every pop-up or log that your AV may give you. Hopefully they do it by severity from least to most severe, and then you can start digesting it from there.
They do, but you would be surprised at how many come in as high every single day, all day long, every day.
Yeah, if that's the other thing too. If a company if security is the mindset of IT or the IT manager or the company in large, they would hire people to actually sit down and investigate these logs. If not, then 3 to 5 years, a ransomware happens. You hopefully remember that you asked for a security engineer and they said no, and then you're like, well, here's your result.
Yeah, but guess what? That executive isn't there at 3 a.m. when you get attacked. They're home sleeping.
Oh yeah,
you're there dealing with it.
Right, and the exec can feel it when the IT team quits, because I don't think stuff like that should be happening.
Yeah. But so remember what I asked you the other day? I said, how do you know at 1 a.m. when your firewall is getting just clamored, what logs do you have set up that are going to wake you up? Because that's what I want. I want to know.
I get screamed at on my phone. If something is happening that is out of line, my phone gets pinged via Slack, because we have proper SNMP monitoring and we have proper logging monitoring from Arctic Wolf as well. If something were to really go down, I'd probably get a call. So from Arctic Wolf.
I also want to follow along with security patches like CISA alerts that you can get to email for free. They'll get a whole bunch of stuff. But if you look at like this patch Tuesday, where there's 120 and what was it, 20 something critical. Some of them were already known in the wild. Some of them are actively in use. One of them was they could send, without authenticating or any user interaction, and execute code on your remote servers if it goes over a certain port. So if that port's open, all your remote servers are basically open to have code run against it. There's a lot of that coming in where reading through the critical exploits so you can have that prevention in place is going to help mitigate. So it's not going to help you catch it live, but that's how you stop it from getting too far.
Well, that's the thing too. You need to enumerate your own network. Like you should be port scanning yourself on a consistent basis. You should be putting that against CVE. Like I think Nessus is a common tool, and try to find your highest rated risks and vulnerabilities in your network, and then patching them on a tier-based list. On a scale from 1 to 10, that's what a CVE is, right? Find your minimum. Like, do we just accept 5s? Or do we accept 4s? And then everything above that, you start patching.
Yeah.
Well, Jordan, what did we say? 85% of the attacks were exchange. Remember we were talking about that yesterday?
It's a lot of exchange, but that's, to me, that falls more into the user thing, because it's not the exchange, it's someone clicking on an email that gives them access to things. So
the proxy.
I think email in general is probably it, but that's more, it's because that's where your weakest link is, which is the end user.
Right.
Although recently, exchange has been hammered with known exploits.
I'd say less than most. A lot of these vulnerabilities require some sort of user authentication At least the easy ones to pull off. Well, maybe not easy, but
Yeah.
from what I've seen, it very rarely requires no authentication to anything to actually compromise the machine. Sometimes, I don't know.
That's when it becomes wormable.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly, right.
Mhm.
The closer it gets to 10, I
Yeah.
believe. But,
Yeah.
um,
So we've got a question from Tim. Actually, it's interesting. Tim and I went back and forth a little bit via email on this, and it kind of opens up another area of discussion. His question is, what are some security recommendations specific to PDQ itself that would suggest for instances when PDQ has been used as a mechanism to deploy ransomware and or malicious files? So you can talk about PDQ, you can talk about PowerShell because they're very similar in how they're being applied, what the
Yeah.
application is.
Yeah, so we've seen a couple of these. Like, there's a I think Reddit thread out there and a couple on Twitter. And every time, at least when I've seen, if I'm missing it, maybe not. It's not our product isn't what's open the doorway to let them in. It's once your environment has been breached, they're installing the free version of our product because our product deploys packages to the network. So they've got the credentials. They're into a machine. They install our product and then use it. So it's PDQ isn't what's allowing the hacker in. It's what they're occasionally using once you've already been breached.
the same discussion with PowerShell,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And the value from that is PDQ's logging is pretty good.
Mhm.
So it's not going to prevent the breach that happened, but it is going to help you track what was done.
Yep.
By following the logging, which is where the value comes into that, which is similar to PowerShell. So there's a stat that like 78% or something of all attacks are using PowerShell now, and a whole bunch of people wanted to just stop using PowerShell, which is an awful idea.
Mhm.
I mean, I feel like the correlation between the market share of Windows products and PowerShell being a huge.
So what it is PowerShell it's on Windows environments. It is there and it works.
Right.
And so it's used a lot. But CISA and other like security centers are saying PowerShell is a valuable tool, not a detriment,
Yeah.
as long as you set up some certain things. So
you've already lost if PowerShell is being
if
used.
PowerShell is being used, they're already in your network from other ways. They're just using PowerShell to expand out and use it. And PowerShell's logging version 3 and later is fantastic. So as long as you don't allow version 2 or earlier to run in your environment, the logging from them running that is going to be top notch, and it's going to help you track down what's happened. If you allow version 2, they're going to go in there, they're going to regress down to version 2, and they're going to run log free, and you're going to lose them. So that's step 1 with PowerShell. PowerShell isn't the problem, but you make sure version 2 is not allowed. Know where your login is on that. And then there's something that's like constrained language mode, which makes it, because a lot of time if they're using PowerShell, they're using custom functions that don't have common used verb nouns for their commands that are out there. So constrained language mode limits it to your PowerShell scripting that you have out there. So they can't just come in there with random things that aren't real commands and run those, because constrained language won't recognize that. And so that's an important one to set up, that it limits what can run. It puts some work on your shoulders. So if you write a new script that has something that's not in there, you have to go in and expand that out to allow that script.
Yeah.
But that protects it from running non-approved commands, basically. And then you can also set PowerShell to only be allowed to run from certain machines or certain subnets. So if they get access to a user computer, they still can't use PowerShell to send at that point. They have to get access to a certain subnet to be able to send it.
Right.
So PowerShell, I'm not saying you got to go through. You want to set up some things. You want to make sure it's rock solid. But to remove PowerShell, you're doing yourself a massive disservice.
Yeah. Tim's kind of got a follow-up here. He says, what about instances where Mimikatz or other processes are used to obtain credentials, which can then be used to leverage local installs of PDQ?
It's the same.
The
It's
same
You've already
thing.
lost.
Yeah.
You've already lost.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the thing. Once they're in, they're in.
So the Mimikatz is interesting because that was a use case of someone that's just trying to prove the credentials were weak. He wasn't built by a hacker. It was built by a guy that was warned in Microsoft that they could get through easily. And so they built it as a test case, and it became the most used thing out there, which is common, but there was nothing malicious behind the intent of it. It was here, let me prove how easy this is. And then instead of going, it's like, oh yeah, I can make something similar. It's like, well, I'll just use that. It's right there.
Mhm.
Nice.
And Bill would like to know, Jordan, can you point us to where we can find info about securing PowerShell?
I was to find that. I think it's in the show notes for the podcast where we're talking to Fernando Tomlinson, but I will find those so we can add them to links below after.
That might be a sick blog post too.
Yeah.
like
Yeah, there's a lot to there.
just
And
common things. To
yeah, so I know PowerShell version 2, you're blocking with group policy a specific DLL.
Hmm.
I don't know off the top of my head. But then constrained language mode, I will find the links to get that set up because it's important to do that.
Yeah.
Because if they can go back to version 2, then PowerShell is the enemy.
Yeah.
If they can't get PowerShell 2, then that logging is just so useful.
Yeah.
Jordan, what's the password program we talked about for admin credentials?
Oh, Laps.
Yeah.
So that's a nice security tool where it makes it so your passwords are rotating and they're
Mhm.
complex and you don't have the admin fat fingering it.
Yeah, local admin accounts are usually a huge risk too, because there's no central point to manage them, and they're usually static. Not a lot of people are running laps, at least that I've seen. And so avoiding them as much as possible is probably the objective. But if you cannot, then laps. And then if you can't use laps, then I guess you'd have static admin accounts, but that's where you could get really screwed.
That is the softest zone.
Yeah.
So you've got laps, another thing. I don't know. Did we talk about MFA?
Jordan touched on it. Yeah.
Did? Okay.
Yeah. I saw in the chat the watch for failed logins. I absolutely agree with that. And 365, I think, does a fantastic job because they send you 7,000 emails every single day. But I particularly like that one because it says risky users, failed sign-ins. I love that. I love to look at that one every single day. All the other ones I ignore, but that one's a good one.
Got another question from, I think this was from Marcel. He asked, what is your take on the latest Realtek SOC vulnerability where the network can be compromised via WAN without any access rights? Well, now let me tell you.
If you're using D-Link,
Get closer to that mic so we can tell you.
if you're using D-Link,
Not so close.
oh, okay.
So
Perfect.
this is when Marcel sent this to me in an email, and I instantly just sent it to Austin. It's like, I need you to explain to me like I'm an idiot, which he does so well.
Yes, do it.
Okay.
Because we are.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Explain like I'm 5. So yeah, it's bad. It's a bad one, right? Unauthenticated from a WAN port. That sucks. Make sure you check your vendor. So if your Boundary or any of your devices, like say Cisco, type Cisco and then the Realtek driver. And if you find nothing on it, you're probably good. A lot of the vendors are what I would call home routing, right? Your typical all-in-one box. D-Link is the one that struck me. Stuff like that. So basically take that driver, take your vendor, throw it into Google. I'll put quotations around the driver too, or both. So that way you get a very strict search. And then if nothing pops up that states that that vendor or that model of device, maybe even break it down to model, not just vendor. If nothing pops up, you're probably good. And then if you're not good, probably replace that device
Well,
as soon as possible, unless
They
there's
have firmware updates for some of them, I think. So if you can't do a firmware, you don't have to replace if they have an available firmware. But if it's out there and they don't have that firmware, I would.
right. It's up to each vendor to do it their way, and it just depends on. Yeah. Oh,
Got a question from Jake. Jake, would you like to read your own question? I feel weird reading your question while you're sitting literally 2.5 feet away from me.
Yeah, I just wanted to go through the proper channels,
Thank you.
This is, I just was wondering, guys, is this more of a concern on the business level, or if I'm at home chilling on my PC doing some gaming with my Bitdefender defense, that's what I've got. Do I still need to worry about this, or is it? Yeah,
I would say to a lighter extent.
Well,
but
my
you
personal
don't.
take is, unless you have someone specifically targeting you for some reason,
Yeah.
if you have minimal, then people that are just out there scanning home networks, they're going to move on to someone that doesn't have anything because there's plenty. There's plenty of unsecured networks out there.
I mean, hey, if you want to see something scary,
Mm-hmm.
go to this website. It's called showdan.io.
Mm-hmm.
Could I pull it up here? The crazy thing is it's absolutely terrifying, or it's a very interesting site. You can go to showdan.io. They have top categories. The top most category is webcams. They will give you a list of webcams that you can log into around the world. You go ahead and click on one, it'll redirect you to a URL. It's somebody's personal
Oh my
Really?
home address.
Oh, that's creepy.
Which is why they sell webcam covers as like swag now, right?
Well,
Like,
it's just misconfigured networks, but
Yeah.
like you think this anonymous, like, oh, I'm nobody, why would I be targeted? It doesn't matter. It's almost a breach of privacy. Do you appreciate your privacy? I appreciate mine.
So-
I try to not be a target. of
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things.
You're always going to be better off making sure you take steps from home than not. I'm just saying, if you, unless you've done something like, obviously, I'm going to go onto the internet and be a 12-year-old kid fighting with people over a video game. So
Right.
I might be a target, so I might want to take more security. But if, in general, if you have security on your network, there's easier targets. They're not going to waste their time unless they're specifically looking for you. That doesn't mean ignore it. I'm just saying,
yeah.
as a
so
home person, it's far less likely unless you're clicking on links you shouldn't have. But that's, once again, goes back to user, not attack.
Yeah. I guess like the overall question was that there are ransomware hackers out there that they will look for home computers and
If they
single
can,
users.
I mean, if they can get you, they will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you are downloading like a
Torrents.
a torrent and you download the wrong one,
Yeah.
it'll run whether or not you have a lot of money to pay the ransomware or not.
So yeah, they're just like, yeah, it's an easy catch.
Right.
Okay.
So you just have to be cautious of those things.
Mhm.
If
That's-
you want to go super crazy, run everything in VMs before you put it on your personal
Mhm.
computer. But
I've seen a few comments in
don't do
here
that.
about
I-
Rapid7 Insight. I've seen that pop up a few times, so I don't know what that is. Has anyone dealt with that?
Rapid7 is I think I've only seen Rapid7 because they have a Wi-Fi adapter that allows you to intercept traffic from Wi-Fi, I think. But that's a good question. I've never worked with Rapid7, so I have no idea.
He said it's a great tool to help you find exploits and vulnerabilities within your system. So,
Sandboxy, Kevin says as well. Is good.
Rapid7. Okay.
You guys have another slide on here. I don't know if you wanted to go over the anatomy of multiple attacks.
Oh.
Did you want to?
yeah. So as we discussed, when that first happens, you're unlikely to know it. There's not going to be a lot of indicators.
They're probably going to sit there for a long time.
They're going to
Yeah.
loop back around and they're going to hit you
Mhm.
where you do know it.
They don't want
And
you to
then-
know. Mhm.
Whether you've paid the ransom or not, hopefully you didn't pay the ransom, because they're going to come back around again. Like at that point, you're a known target that has paid off for them.
Well, and
Even
it's-
if you haven't paid the ransom, I'd say you paid
Yeah.
off for them, because if they have locked out your network or your environment,
And it's not only the ransom. There's different kind of attacks too. There's the CFO sends accounts payable. I need you to send $200,000, and it's because they spoof their email. Phishing is part of the
Phishing
initial attack.
is the biggest vector
Mhm.
because it works. People
works.
get suckered.
Mhm.
It's easy to be suckered. I get suckered.
They get really good at making convincing fakes, right?
I mean,
Yes.
if everyone in the world receives an Amazon-ZXY- at AmazonZXY.com address, it must be working. It must be working enough that it's a valuable prospect to try to fish people into giving you money, right?
Mhm.
that's the thing about phishing, is it's easy to cast an extremely wide net. And even
Yes.
if you catch 0.5%, if you cast a wide enough net, that's still significant.
It's really
Mhm.
easy to create a domain and then pretend to or make this terrible email and sit on a phone, and it's almost free or close to free, and you can make hundreds, thousands off of it, right?
Mhm.
Well, the more success you have, the more times you're going to get attacked, though, over and over and over again. I think this graphic really illustrates it well, because it isn't not just a one-time thing, over and over.
Yeah, they loop around. So it's
Yeah.
it just because they passed by doesn't mean not coming back. They got it once. They probably attempted to leave some sort of remnant behind where it's easier for them to come back. Hopefully,
Yep.
you've taken care of that with your remediation. But
No.
I wish I could say it stopped with CryptoLocker, but no, it didn't.
Yeah.
It was they kept trying. I think they'll probably continue to keep trying.
Yeah.
I had one
So-
in my inbox just yesterday that I was like, that's definitely a scam. It's like it was from UPS, but there was a space between the U and the P and the P and the S.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're like, your order is delayed. Click here for details.
Yeah.
And it's like things that just general things that people will always get concerned about. Yeah.
I always tell my users, "Are you expecting it? Then delete it. Don't even
Mhm.
click. You don't need to
Yeah.
click on it."
so are you saying I'm not going to get? I've won like 13 gift cards over the last couple of weeks. Are you saying I'm not going to get these?
No, you totally are. You totally are.
Yeah, after you pay them about $2,000, they'll give you
Your $15 gift card to Amazon. Yeah.
I think anyone in your financial department needs to set up a dual factor. Give them a phone call. If you get an email from the CFO saying buy 500 Amazon gift cards, give them a call.
Yeah.
Just check that out. That's easy. That's an
Yeah.
easy one to do.
Absolutely.
Um,
Was there anything else that final parting words that you wanted to touch on?
Well, we never really touched on storage at all.
No,
Okay,
well,
let's
yeah,
hit it.
yeah, we did. Well,
Did
Well,
you?
the
we hit it
backups,
briefly
yeah.
where back before we had multiple locations, different power grids, but
Right.
that's one where it's maybe you want to talk about air gap, or there's
Yeah.
immutable, which isn't infallible, but it does make it harder to write to override it or keeps it safe.
Right. So the on-prem, the cloud, the
On-prem,
different place, all
but
at least one immutable, right?
yeah, if you can do
Yeah.
something air gapped where there's no way for him to get into that, that's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah,
as
the
a-
business critical, totally separate, right?
Slow storage is extremely cheap. It's if you're not using the, like, if it's not like active in use, like slow storage just for backups is very cheap. Just do what you think is right, but I think something where it's completely separated, so if you need to, you can bring it back is
And
important.
You can't back. Okay. Most people can't back up everything. And it's a good idea in general, not even for backups, just to tier your network in terms of what's most important, what's least important on a scale from 1 to 5. 1 being, if we lose this, all is lost. 5 being, I don't care. So, and user endpoints are a good 5. If that is locked or lost, the data on that, typically, you don't really care. And then ones could be like domain controllers or servers that run critical business infrastructure, stuff like that. So it's a good idea to sit down and outline what is most important. So that way, when things do happen, you at least have a list that you can start going off of to restore or check these devices. So
3 takeaways for our show today. 1, lock your doors at night.
that's right.
2, see something, say something.
Mm-hmm.
3, do not talk to strangers.
That's right.
That is the good for security. You're not going to have kidnap hacks.
Well, the one thing we
That's
didn't talk about, though, Jordan, and I believe this, is what's your plan? What's your plan? Do you have it written down? Do you have your network?
So in your case, you said you had a binder of servers.
Yeah. I know it sounds ghetto. I did.
So
I had a spreadsheet of every server IP because I can't remember anything. I'm too old. I had it all written down in a binder, in a safe, in fact.
I helped a buddy out a while ago. I don't even know the name of the company, but they got locked, but their VM environment was still secure. So I was able to write them a code to go through and rebuild their server environment, names and IPs, and match it all up and get the basics of software. And then their storage, I'm going to have to go through and do the repair. But that's one way. If your virtual environment is safe, rebuilding is a lot faster than doing it manually.
Right.
But you still have to. That's only building the machines. So they're empty husks. You still have to get all the data and software over.
Man, would I have loved to have known you. Yes.
My consulting fees are very reasonable.
to Ken's point, too, ACLs are great. You can go even farther in VRF, specific networks, virtual routing function, I believe. But anyways, it's a separated routing table. You can go even farther in air gap networks. That's the ultimate separation, segmentation. ACLs are great, though, and should be used on either risky networks like guest networks or networks that you need control over. Like
ACLs are access control lists?
Yes.
Okay.
Make sure not to tear your ACL.
That's right.
Did
Don't do
that
it.
actually?
Don't do it.
I've done it.
I haven't done it yet.
Don't.
I hope I never do.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Unpleasant.
I mean, it sounds really dumb, but your disaster plan should include who do you call and what's their phone number, because you're going to be freaking out.
Call the police. Call your mom. Call your dad.
You're joking, but in some cases, you do have to call the FBI.
No.
And what's
for
that
sure.
number and what's your steps? Because you cannot think because you're crying under your desk. So
And
it is a good idea.
if you are doing backups, test them
All the time.
regularly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Do pretend little drills. Okay, it's go time. What are we going to do?
Do chaos. The Netflix chaos monkey. Start breaking stuff. And if your network can't survive without breaking a couple things, then maybe you need to rethink your infrastructure design.
Call Austin. He'll come and break it.
I will.
I know we're running low on
For
time,
free.
but this is one that you mentioned in the dry run. So someone said if you have a guest Wi-Fi, create a separate VLAN, and you were in the impression that VLAN's not enough.
VLAN's not enough. When you think VLAN, you're thinking broadcast domains, right? But usually that router, like if we were to draw a simple segmented VLAN 1, VLAN 2, as soon as you create those two subnets, that router knows how to communicate with both subnets. You need to slap an ACL on your, at minimum, an ACL on that router, or you create a VRF, or you directly connect the guest network into a firewall and then use policies to not allow it into trusted zones, because that's an untrusted zone, right?
So you don't want to just have the guest Wi-Fi go into its own VLAN. You want to really
If you
extra
from the guest
steps to
Wi-Fi,
segment.
from the guest Wi-Fi, if you can get on a Windows computer and ping any critical infrastructure, you lost. You lose.
Yeah, done.
Even if it's password authenticated, like WPA2 or 3, using a user or a password, it's not enough. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. You got to lock it down with real segmentation. A VLAN is good. It's just not enough.
So should you hire hackers to try to hack your system, Austin?
Yeah, you should try to hack your own system. Like, don't destroy it, but
Yeah.
enumerate, like I said, using Nessus, and see what somebody could take advantage of on your network. Or even Nmap or ZenMap, the GUI version is a great tool. Just start scanning stuff. See what ports are open. And sometimes Nmap will tell you what vulnerabilities it has based on those ports. It's a pretty good enumeration tool.
So I'd like to think if I just randomly ran that in our environment, I would get a stern talking to in short order.
I mean, we do it to ourselves.
Well, but you
So-
guys probably have it planned. I'm saying
Yeah,
me
yeah.
outside the department. If I just start scanning, you guys, hey Jordan,
We'd probably get notification that somebody is scanning stuff, but
Let's find out later, Jordan.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not going to battle that team. They're smarter than me by a lot.
Well, it'll be fun.
Run laps, but don't tear your ACL.
There you go. Exactly. That is perfect. Okay. Thank you for the conversation, you guys. I mean, this is a very important topic. And again, it's one of those situations that it's not if you get hit, it is when. And so it's important to get your plans laid out, kind of like what you said, Tara. Map that thing out and run your tests. That will wrap it up for our webcast. I actually have an outro. Should I hit the outro on this?
goodbye.
The intro worked. Let's hit the outro. Here we
I
go.
believe in you.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. Bye. Thank you for being a part of our webcast today. If you had questions that we were not able to get to today, feel free to reach out to our support forums. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you back here next week.